Okay, I'm going to call this Board of Adjustments meeting to order. Can I get everybody to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Okay. Denise, could I get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Chairman Clark,
Here.
Board Member Dick,
Present.
Board Member Bonagofsky,
Here.
Board Member Smith, Board Member Willett.
We have Board Member Smith here.
Are you there, Randy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
And Board Member Willett.
Present. Here.
All right, next we have special presentations. We don't have any. Last meeting, we had meeting minutes, and I need an approval, a motion and a second for approval of the meeting minutes.
I'll move to approve meeting minutes from February 7th.
Second?
Okay, I have a
Second?
motion and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Randy.
Board Member Willett.
Aye.
Board Member Bonagofsky.
Aye.
Chairman Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Dick,
Yes.
Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Okay, so our IT guy doesn't start yelling at me. Please speak into your microphone when you respond. Thank you. All right, public hearings. We got a variant request, case number 2023-001. And I'm going to open that public hearing now. The fence height and the materials at 1261 Baldwin Avenue. The property owners are here, I see, I think. Okay. And from there, the provisions of the City Municipal Code, and in particular Title 17 thereof, the subdivision regulations, and the comprehensive plan of the City of Canyon City are incorporated into the record of this hearing as is set forth verbatim. Okay, can we have a staff report, Patrick?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Adjustment. This afternoon, we are here to consider a variance request. This has to do with fence height and materials for the property at 1261 Baldwin Avenue. So the subject property is located on Baldwin Avenue, east of South 12th Street. As my staff report makes clear, it's about 770 feet east of South 12th Street. The property also has a non-continuous alley abutting the property on the north side, as demonstrated here in the picture. Property is zoned R2, medium-density residential, and is in excess of 19,000 square feet in area. Note that for the R2 medium-density zone district in Canyon City, the minimum lot size is approximately 5,000 square feet, so this is well in excess of the minimum. Staff was made aware of a fence that had been installed on the property in June of 2022, for which a permit was never sought by the property owner or issued by the city. Upon inspection, it appeared that the lack of a fence permit was the least of the issues associated with this fence. Specified in section 1706050 of the Canyon City Municipal Code, the fence regulations are contained there, and they pertain to all residentially zoned properties within the city limits of Canyon City. Within those regulations, fence heights are limited to 6 feet. This is as per section 1706050B2A. And materials associated with fence construction in residential areas include masonry, wood, wood composition, aluminum, vinyl, PVC, wrought iron, coated aluminum chain link, or other materials that might be approved by the zoning administrator are regulated by 1706-050 B2B. The fence was not only constructed without the issuance of a permit, it crosses the public alley north of the property. This can be easily remedied by obtaining a license agreement to construct within right-of-way through the Public Works Department. In fact, the city has done these things before. Some of you may have noticed that there's sort of a floating seating area in front of Doritos that occupies 2 parking spaces along Main Street. This was done by virtue of a license agreement. Now, as constructed, the fence is 8 feet in height, thus violating section 1706-050 B2A. As constructed, the fence is made of a woven wire type of material, which is not permitted on the list of approved materials, thus violating section 1706-050 B2B. Now, section 1710.050 of the Canyon City Municipal Code establishes criteria for evaluating variance requests. As the staff report summarizes, the applicant has not provided any evidence of a physical hardship in existence on the property, which would make compliance with the city's fence code requirements impossible. The applicant's justification for this variance request is inconvenience because of interference with wildlife. Note, this variance only came about after staff attempted to serve 3 notices of violations concerning the fence in order to seek compliance with our standards. This violation has been ongoing for more than 7 months at this point. Staff can find that none of the 6 criteria for variance requests that has been satisfied by virtue of this particular application. And further, there is an issue of precedence to consider. There are no unique features to the property to create an exception. Thus, granting this request would significantly compromise the city's ability to enforce its fence standards citywide. So with that, staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment cite the 2 findings of fact as included in the staff report as a certification of Canyon City's jurisdiction to act on the variance request for a fence requirement variance at 1261 Baldwin Avenue. And following a public hearing on the variance request, to hear not only from the applicant but also from any concerned citizens, staff recommends that the Board of Adjustment find that the applicant has failed to satisfy the criteria associated with variance requests, and that the requested front yard variance relief for fence requirements specified in 1706-050 B2A and B at 1761 Baldwin Avenue should be denied. That would conclude the staff presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that the Board of Adjustment may have. I do believe that we had the property owner present this afternoon, as well as several residents who received notice.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Do any of the board members have any questions of Patrick?
Yeah, I do. Patrick, one quick one. Toward the very end of your presentation, you mentioned front yard variance?
No, it's not a front yard variance. I modified this PowerPoint from a previous presentation that was asking for a front yard setback. So front yard got left in there by accident. This is a
Okay.
rear yard and side yard fence
Okay.
variance.
Any other questions?
Sure, so the fence is along the perimeter of the property entirely and around it. However, it's across the public alley access. So does that alley have through traffic?
The alley is discontinuous. It comes off of South 12th, but it doesn't go anywhere. Just a little bit east of the subject property, it essentially dead ends. I don't know if there's any utilities in there or not. I don't believe that Public Works would have any sort of real grief about granting a license agreement to construct a fence across there. It just makes sure that the property owner who installed the fence would be on notice that if the city ever needed to do any work within that alley, the city would have the right to enter and remove the obstruction if necessary.
Is it?
Is this where we can we listen to
Well,
the?
we are going to ask them for input here.
Okay.
This is just right now, if you have any more questions for Patrick.
No, I think my questions would be for the homeowner.
Okay. Well, from here, do I have anybody in the audience that would like to speak?
Well, I would start with the applicant first.
You're correct. The applicant, I'm sorry. And when you step up to the mic, please state your name and your address.
Timothy Martin, 1261 Baldwin Avenue. So, I don't know if you guys had a chance to read the project narrative. Were you able to?
It's on, yes.
Okay. So, like you said, we didn't get a permit because I didn't realize that was a thing. Didn't realize the fencing material was something that was regulated. I replaced the fencing with field fencing, just like had been there for years before. As far as the alley, if that's a concern, I'm more than happy to move it out of the way, but I just put the fence, the new fence back where the old fence had been for, I don't know, 50 years. It was running straight through a big old 100-year-old elm tree, so I understand lots of people have issues with deer to varying degrees, but I think we've been inundated with quite a few problems at our property just because of the location of where it's at. I mean, and what we're trying to do in our backyard. It's not an inconvenience to me or my wife or my son to put effort and time and money into trying to grow our food and having the deer destroy it. That's not an inconvenience. It's not an inconvenience to me to have the deer chase our dogs or charge my kids or me, and you know, that's not an inconvenience. That's important to me to protect my family and my pets. I've tried over the years, as you read in the project narrative, tried 6-foot fences around my garden, kept some of them out, but some of them still jumped in, and it caused issues trying to get them out to the deer and to the garden still. You know, went with the open wire fence because I didn't want to block neighbors' views. I was trying to respect what they would want. I have 3 neighbors sent me with stuff with support for the fence. As far as I know, I mean, I don't know that I tried to talk to everybody around me. I couldn't talk to a few because I don't even know if they live in the house behind me anymore, but I tried to talk to everybody and make sure that they had no issue with it, and nobody did. I mean, the reason it's gone on for so long, as far as the 7 months, is it's important to me. This decides kind of the future of what we do in our backyard. And it's been years of struggling with this issue, trying all kinds of things and trying everything we could to deal with this issue, and this was my solution. And wasn't my intention to get crosswise with the city regulations or the permitting process. I wasn't even thinking about that stuff. I was just focused on solving a problem. I don't interact in society all that much. I kind of work and go home and do stuff in my yard. And so it didn't occur to me. Like I said, this is important to us. I feel like where we are, there's hay fields all around us, and I have fruit trees, nut trees. We're just trying to do something in our backyard, and it's been impossible up to this point. And it's just gotten worse and worse over the last few years with the herds of deer getting bigger. And so that was my reasoning for going with the 8-foot fence, because I had tried 6 foot, and it was a danger to the deer, and it was a danger to me when they got in there and still ate the garden, and then I'm trying to get them out, or having to call DOW. So that was the purpose of it. I mean, that's kind of where we're coming from. That's what I stated in the project narrative.
Okay. Anything else?
No?
Anybody have any questions of the applicant?
I do. Since you've had this 8 feet up, have you witnessed an attempt by a deer to enter or exit?
No, I have not. I've seen them come up to the fence and then they divert around and go onto the hayfields.
Okay, so it is
It's been very
working
effective.
as a deterrent?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
as I stated in this was the last year was the first time in probably almost a decade that we were actually able to harvest our garden without having it destroyed. And, you know, we were kind of willing to somewhat go along with the possibility of losing the garden to some extent, but then when you factor in coming after the dog and the kids, that was kind of the end point for me. Because, I mean, it's not all of them, but there's a handful of them. They have no fear of human beings or dogs anymore, and they're more than willing to show you. And so that was kind of my solution to try to make the backyard into the sanctuary so we could grow our food. You know, obviously we can't be totally self-sufficient, but we want to be as much as we can. My wife cans and does a lot of stuff with the garden, so it carries on over the year, and you know, that's a big part of what we wanted to accomplish when we bought the property.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, if, Gary?
Yes, go ahead, Randy.
Mr. Martin, was this done purely for cost measures? Did you find that the 8-foot fence that you have now was more cost effective than a 6-foot wooden fence?
I didn't even look into a 6-foot fence, to be honest, because like I said, the 6-foot fences that I put around the garden did not deter the deer. So I didn't even price a fence that was 6 foot.
A lot of my neighbors around me do not do a chain link or anything like that. They do a 6-foot wooden fence because Department of Wildlife has said in the past that if deer cannot see what's on the other side, they will not jump over that fence. And I think that's why the city variance offers a 6-foot wooden fence as one of the options. So that's why I'm wondering if this link fence that you put up was cheaper than the wooden fence, because I think you can get around it if you put that 6-foot wooden fence up. I think that would solve the problem.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you in all instances, but my father, who lives in the same neighborhood, has a 6-foot solid fence in his backyard, and once the deer learn that they can jump it, they jump it, and it doesn't deter them.
Okay, all right. I'm kind
I-
of just going by my previous experience, but if you've experienced something different, I understand.
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm not saying that, I think it's like anything, like some of them, I think it would deter, but I think there's still the very real possibility that it wouldn't deter some of them. And with the trees and stuff I have going on in my backyard, that's my experience with the garden. They detect it, and when they're hungry and going crazy, they will jump it.
Is that it, Randy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Mr. Martin, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How long have you guys lived there?
I think we've lived there 18 years.
18 years?
Yes, sir.
And how long has the fence been up?
7 months.
7 months, okay. And how many trees and stuff are you talking about back there?
Well, right now we have one big apple tree and a fruit and a nut tree in the backyard because, as stated in the narrative, over time, lost trees to the deer. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now, and I kind of put on hold planting anymore until we got this fence issue figured out.
Okay. In your project narrative,
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned that you were working to remedy the situation. And so I'm guessing that this has to do with remedying the situation regarding the violation of the ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, like I said, I didn't realize on the front end about the
Oh, sure,
height.
yeah, sure, I understand.
So, I mean, and, this is part of remedying it in my view. I'm
Sure.
trying to,
I see. Are you taking any other steps, or is this just kind of your first?
no, this is not my first step. I mean, I've gone to city council to try to change, see what their thoughts were on just changing the height requirement on the fence
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff like that, but, as far as,
Have you been working on anything else in case this doesn't go your way? Have you got any other ideas or plans or anything like that?
as far as,
I mean, if the hearing doesn't end up favorably toward your variance, I mean, like, do you have a plan B if that doesn't work?
well, then I guess it comes down to seeing what the city thinks should be done with the fence. I mean, if it's a case of tearing it down or something, I'd probably be kind of resistant to that because, lowering the height, in my opinion, puts my yard and my family in danger. So,
I'm just-
it's kind of,
Is this
that's,
your only option? I guess this is my question. Is that particular fence the only option you have available to you?
yeah, well, pretty much. I mean, as far as the time and effort that I put into installing it, I mean,
Right.
my son and I and my dad spent 3 weeks working on it and, I mean, it's not perfect, but I mean, it was something that I was pretty proud of doing because it was a time investment from me to do something to protect my backyard.
Right.
And I guess I'm not understanding your question.
Well, I suppose the question is, well, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if this appeal does not find in your favor, what would you do from that, after that? I mean, where are you going to go with it? I mean, have you looked at, okay, well, this fence isn't good, so let me try this? I mean, you said you grew up in the area,
Yeah,
and you've lived in that place for 18 years.
Yes, sir.
correct? So you're aware of the deer's pretty kind of a problem for anybody who wants to grow. I mean, I empathize with you on that if you want to grow, garden or any of that kind of thing. So you have my empathy on that regard. But what other kinds of things have been done, or other people done? I mean, is this the only way of preventing this, I guess, is my question.
I think it depends on the property. I think when you have a property like mine where you're trying to accomplish growing things in your whole backyard and it's been a hayfield, so I haven't replanted it, so it's clover, and we water, so in the summer for the bees, I think it depends on the situation. I think some neighbors have been able to build little cages around various plants and stuff, but I also think where our property's situated, we get high traffic of the deer. We have more going on in our backyard as far as what we're trying to grow and do in our backyard. I mean, basically, we want our backyard to be full of food sources that we can harvest and can and preserve. And so, you know, over the years, have we talked to the DOW? Yeah, I've talked to the DOW about different solutions, and, you know.
Have they offered you anything?
No.
I guess that was one of my.
No, I mean, you know, at one point it was like shoot them with paintballs.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, first of all, half of them don't care. Second of all, I'm not, you know, capable of staying up all night guarding the backyard from that. You know, research things like growing different plants. We tried things that deter deer. We tried that. You know, like I said, I think in certain situations, there might be other options for other people, but in this situation with what we wanted to do in our backyard and how we have things growing and stuff, I just think that this was the simplest, most effective, safest solution for us and the deer. And that's why, you know, we went with it. Not realizing that it would end up in
Yeah,
this
oh,
situation.
Yeah, I understand that. Have you talked to anybody else that's had similar problems and maybe asked them about their potential solutions, other than what you've done?
I've talked to some of the guys that, I forget what his name was. I called some guy at the Forest Service, talked to him about stuff, and he agreed that a higher fence was the deterrent that was most effective. As far as, like I said, I've seen people do smaller footprints and be able to somewhat effectively protect the smaller footprint garden. When it's only 10 by 10, you can maybe do that.
Yeah.
Other than that, you know, done research online with, like I said, growing deterrents, things like that. It hasn't really worked out, so.
Gotcha. That's it.
Gary, I have another question, please.
Sure, go ahead, Randy.
Mr. Martin, you've mentioned several times you've done all this research about what deer like and what they don't like. And you've lived there 18 years. I guess one of my concerns is, how did you not know about a fence permit or some sort of building permit? I mean, how come you didn't know to go through the proper channel to see what kind of fences were available to you? I mean, I think that's kind of where we're at now is you've built this fence and now you're kind of asking for forgiveness now to get this variance when we might have been able to hit this head on at the very beginning if you would have come to the city at the beginning. I think that it's a little bit different aspect. I know we're kind of backing into the problem now. Now we're trying to figure out if we can save your property with this deer, but maybe we could have avoided all this if you would have done your proper research with the proper fence in the beginning. Do you see that as a problem, or am I right or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I mean, I expressed that in the project narrative. I mean, I understand that, you know, not really realizing that put myself and even you guys in a situation that we'd probably all prefer not to be in. And, you know, as far as it was T-posts and wire, I didn't even consider.
But that's, again, that's what Mr. Weldon is asking there. I mean, if we follow the city's variances, it's going to make us in a hard situation where we're going to have to deny this because it's not legal right now. And you're wanting us to kind of change precedent based on something that, like I said, you backed into. So what do you want us to do about it? Do you want us to approve this 8-foot fence because of something that was basically poor planning?
Well, is it poor planning when you're trying to protect your property and your family? I
It
mean,
wouldn't be if you would have done the proper research and come to the city in the first place to get the permit.
well then,
That's what I'm trying to
while
say.
we're-
I don't want to be the bad guy here, but it just seems that possibly we could have fixed this, 18 months ago.
and how would you have fixed it?
Well, first thing we have to do is come to the city to find out what permits were available, see what kind of fencing was available. Because I'm afraid right now that all this money you put into this 8-foot fence, that's an expense that maybe you didn't need to incur. I hate to see you have to take down this fence and then put up the proper fence. That's all I'm asking.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're speaking to the choir. If you guys pursue a path that forces me into a situation where I have to tear down a fence that I sunk a significant amount of money for myself and a significant amount of time into, that's a pretty big hardship on me. And, as far as going forward or researching a fence permit, I didn't realize. But when it was brought to my attention, I'm not here trying to necessarily,
Can I interrupt for a second?
yes, sir.
That's technically what you guys are discussing is the whole reason you're here, asking for a variance. I understand, listening to Mr. Smith and you discuss this at this point, things should have been thought about that didn't get thought about.
Yes, sir.
Things should have been aware of that weren't aware of, but at that point, we're past that stage. I think at this point, the whole idea behind this hearing is to request a variance, which is what you're in the middle of doing. So, for lack of better words, trying to explain that in more is really, I'll say, a waste of your time.
Okay.
I understand your position, and I understand his question.
I do too,
Okay.
and I'm,
And I'm going to say, I don't mind you speaking, but we're kind of going in a circle with that conversation. I appreciate it, though. Anybody else have any other questions?
I do.
Okay.
If I may ask just a couple quick questions. How are the posts affixed to the ground? Did I hear you say they were T-posts?
yes, sir.
So they're 8-footers, 10-footers?
They're 10-foot T-posts, so they're
okay.
2 foot into the ground.
Copy that. Does the fence obscure any view, or is it just see-through?
It's just see-through. I mean,
Okay.
the holes are probably about like that.
Just the right size for a deer. Got it. So the view is unobstructed. Your neighbors don't have any qualms with
I
your
have-
fence?
I mean, I don't have ones from everybody, but I have 3 here that,
Of neighbors who
of
are,
neighbors who
support your fence?
support my fence, if you
Okay.
guys would care to.
And so not only is it the loss of your time and your effort into your gardening and your harvesting, but there's a safety issue involved as well?
That is actually the most important thing to me as far as, I realize our activities draw them to some extent to the backyard, but in the last few years, when we had numerous incidences of them coming after the dog and the kids, that's my biggest concern.
Okay.
That's, I can somewhat swallow other things, but that's something that I'm unwilling to, and that's why I'm here now asking for the variance. It's not necessarily about not having to tear down the fence because of time or money I put into it. It's because it's important to me and my wife to have a backyard where, we can feel safe and we can feel like, oh, the kids or the dogs that are out there and don't really have to worry about a deer coming after them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Anything else? Well, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. You had another one.
Just so we're not getting off too far away from where we were just at, you're talking about safety for your kids and pets and all that stuff. Any other families in the neighborhood with young kids and all that kind of stuff? And what are they doing?
I mean, they're in the same situation that we are to some extent. I mean, Josh here, he lives right beside me. He has kids and dogs and had some issues with the deer as far as his kids and dogs. And actually, I think in his thing, he talks about how the fence kind of diverted them away from his property as well. And that's, you know, thankful for it. I mean, another, I think Andrew and Tracy down the street talk about, you know, they prefer to have their kid play in their backyard because they have worries about the deer if their daughter's in their front yard. I mean, you know, our front yard is still open. There's still a possibility of it, but it's not, to me, if you're spending 5 or 6 hours in a place where the deer are coming all the time is different than maybe somewhere where you're just walking through to get the mail or whatnot.
Just curious how some of your other neighbors might be handling that type of safety issue that you're talking about.
Well, one of the neighbors threw a hammer at a deer that charged him. So, I mean, I guess there's various ways, but I mean, my purpose was to protect us, but also keep the deer kind of from having to be put in that situation as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
First of all, you said you came to the city council meeting. I did not get a chance to review the last city council meeting where this issue was addressed, but there was a Department of Wildlife officer at that meeting or consulted by the city council?
Not at that meeting.
Not at
We've had wildlife officials come and talk with council, but it was not at the last
Okay.
meeting.
So, and you say you spoke to a Division of Wildlife officer,
He was a Forest Service guy.
Forest Service guy, okay.
And I have talked to Zach Holder, and, you know, we had the same discussion as similar to what Randy brought up about the 6-foot solid fences being somewhat of a deterrent, but that if there's something in your yard that they want to get, they're probably going to jump that too. And that kind of lined up with my experiences with my dad's property.
Okay. Next question I had is the letters that you have, do we have a copy of those?
No, sir, I just brought them in today.
Okay, can we get a copy of those? I think we'd like to
You
look
can-
at those.
You can have them.
Okay. You can just hand them to me. Thank you. You guys want to look through these, or?
Yeah, I'll take one.
Well, you got a stack, not one.
One less than 100.
Okay, and the other thing is, when you did the research talking to the Forest Service guy, you had mentioned what did you ask him, I guess, is the question I have.
I was just asking him what and this was, to be fair, this was after the fence. So I was just seeing what people's ideas were, because based on my experience, the 8-foot fence was already, you know, a thing to deter them. But when I talked to him, he said similar things. He said when they build those corridors to try to keep the deer off the highways and stuff, they usually go with 8-foot, because the 6-foot is a deterrent, but lots of the deer will still jump the 6-foot. And he just said if you have fruit trees and plants and stuff in your yard that the deer desire, especially if they're having a hard time finding food somewhere else, or it's on one of their main trails, then it's just going to be a little bit of a nightmare keeping him out. And he agreed that an 8-foot fence was probably the most effective way, but, you know, he wasn't saying that that was the only way either.
Right. Well, and doing a little research on my own for this hearing, and after reading the packet, the one thing I did discover, based off of the Department of Wildlife's opinion on some of these fences, yes, a high fence will prevent a lot of things. In that particular circumstance, though, the city code was written based off the more probable cause, and the height of the fence was established based off the general acceptability of deterrent and also security. With that, the 3 acceptable items on the city code are the 3 items that are approved, and I understand you're asking for a variance for that. The one thing that sticks out in my mind, especially talking to the DOW, is that a solid fence is the best deterrent. And the reason for that is based off of what I was informed is they cannot see. Once they cannot see, they tend not to jump over because they have no idea where they're going. And I understand that was the premise behind why the height limit was set and the type of fencing was set for the city code. Based off of that information, I'm understanding your position, and yeah, an 8-foot fence would definitely be a deterrent. A 10-foot fence would be a deterrent too, but they set the limit at 6 feet for veritable reasons. One of them being accessibility and security. With that thought process in mind, I was kind of curious why you didn't consider a solid fence. Now, based off of what you said about living there and being around deer and all that,
Well, I mean, the biggest reason I didn't pursue a solid fence is because, quite honestly, I didn't want to live in a fortress. I don't think any of my neighbors would have appreciated a 6-foot solid fence. You know, I was trying to consider their feelings on the matter as well. And, you know, I just went with what we had always had. We had open field fence there for years. I like it. The neighbors liked it because they can see I'm not blocking their view. Yes, it might have been more effective, but like I said, my father has 6-foot solid fence. You can't see over it, and it's a daily occurrence. The deer jump over it. Once one of them's done it, it still happens. And I mean, I do believe that it can be a deterrent, but I guess my reasoning for the 8-foot was it's an absolute deterrent. You know, it's not, oh, a deer panics and he feels comfortable jumping the 6-foot fence and then he's in the yard. Then he doesn't want to get out of the yard. Then what do? Then I have an issue with the deer trapped in my backyard. Because I've had that happen with the gardens where I had the 6-foot fence around it. The deer jumped into the garden area and then he didn't feel comfortable jumping out. And then it was a nightmare. And so that was one of the reasons I was trying to avoid. But as far as the solid, I mean, that was consideration for my neighbors and just kind of the aesthetic that the neighborhood kind of has. It's kind of a farm agricultural area. So that was the reason. And I mean, if I would have gone solid, I would have, at that point, I would have done an 8-foot solid fence on that same principle, not knowing, you know,
right,
limitations on it. But that's why, because I mean, I was trying to respect what the neighbors had going on, trying to respect their views as far as seeing around, and that's why.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make more of an observation than a question. I admire a large part of the motivation. There are really good things about that. But we are going to have to make a decision based on the standards that every city has for granting a variance. And according to my understanding and reading, none of those conditions that are acceptable have been made. So I'm not even sure that I think that we're obligated to go by the standards that the city provides. And if those conditions for variance were met, then it would be really easy to be generous. But I'm not an authority on that, and I'm sure we'll give more specific, clear guidance on this. But I think that we have to find a way to meet the standards for granting the variance, which I think everybody would like to do, but we're limited in what we can do. Maybe I'm incorrect, but
Oh, no, you're absolutely
That's-
correct.
okay.
Which is really what this commission's, or this
Yeah.
committee's all about. Once we feel or believe and we vote on whether or not a variance is acceptable to the committee and acceptable to the city code and everything, that is our duty. And that is the task we perform here with that thought process in mind.
May I ask for a point of clarification?
You betcha.
So a variance doesn't mean, we're making an exception to the rule. We're making an exception to the rule. We're not changing the rule. So if we're
Yes.
making a variance, we're taking into consideration this one isolated case. This doesn't mean we are changing the precedent or the law. We're.
I disagree, sir.
I was going to
Okay,
say.
please share. Yeah, educate me.
Variances are evaluated on the case of a hardship test. Hardship test means that there is an exigent condition on the property that makes compliance with the zoning code, as it's written, either completely impossible or very impractical, okay? Those exigent conditions can be things like an unusual shape for the property, an unusually small lot, an unusual small size. It can include topography that makes complying with the code extremely difficult. It can include things like a culturally significant historical structure that someone is trying to preserve, or a habitat area associated with a protective species. Without some specific exigent condition that's present on site, basically, if a variance is approved just because a homeowner says, well, I'm having wildlife interactions that I don't feel comfortable with, I'm sorry, at that point, all you've done is blow a hole in your ability to enforce the code citywide, because anyone else could come before the Board of Adjustment and make the same claim, and there would be no grounds for a denial at that point.
Can I say something?
Well, before you do, to clarify that more, yes, we would be setting a new standard by granting a variance to some degree, because the hardship issue is the issue to grant a variance. Until that hardship is met, we really don't grant a variance, simply because the standard is the standard. If you're going to change the standard every time someone approaches it, then you're setting a new standard. That make
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I guess the curiosity for me is, do we anticipate a lot of people requesting 8-foot fence height variances? And should they be solid 8-foot fences? I might be inclined to say, well, I don't know.
That would be a planning commission issue. That's not something we address at this level. If we're going to change the city ordinance, that would be something we don't do. And by granting variances, we, as Mr. Mulready said, we kind of blow a hole in that by basically fudging it every time. So whether you get 500 or 1, and then 1, and then 1, and 1, and it ends up being 500, you're continually revising that standard. And that's the issue at hand here.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Patrick?
So,
Yes.
I mean, I would say that if you did, I understand what you're saying as far as the hardship, but it's not, and like I said before, it's not an inconvenience. It's not, I'm uncomfortable with the situation. This is something that we've been dealing with for 10 years now. And, you know, this isn't, everybody experience with wildlife isn't the same. I mean, depending on where you live. I live on the very edges of the city in a place that has lots of open land. And it is a hardship for me and my family. You know, maybe it's not the shape of the property, but it is a hardship because of where the river is, where the hay fields are, where my property is, and how the deer funnel through there. I mean, you know, to act like this is like blowing a hole in the whole.
Well, theoretically, it's not, we're not blowing up a ship and sinking it, okay?
I mean, I'm just saying, I
But-
don't think this issue might not be important to most of the people in the city. You know, they
Oh,
might.
I would beg to differ with you there.
Well,
There's a
as
lot of
far
people
as,
that have
like-
problems with deer.
No, I mean, I think lots of people do have problems with deer, but I also don't think that everybody has the same situation as I do, or the same, you guys might have a different experience, but I mean, like I said, we're in a place that's very quiet, very open. There's lots of places for the deer to go without being run over, and we're right in the way of it. And when we're trying to accomplish something in our backyard for, as far as growing food and stuff, I mean, I'm not talking like we want a little garden. I mean, we want quite a few fruit and nut trees. We want a big garden. We want our herb gardens and stuff, because this is important for our future. And so that's where I think there is a hardship there. This isn't, you know, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's not just something that makes me uncomfortable. It's important to us, and, you know, that's why I pursued it up to this point.
Okay.
Got one for Patrick. Patrick, if we were to grant this variance, how would that affect that particular neighborhood or even elsewhere in the city?
If you were to grant this variance, it would mean that R2 properties, generally throughout the city, would have an exception created. You would have we would have to have grounds to say no to such requests for any property zoned R2 anywhere else in the city. If you grant this request, an argument could be made that properties that are more than, say, 19,000 square feet could get away with a greater fence height than other properties in the city. So you open this door by precedent, and there's no way of knowing what the actual impact could be. I mean, the law of unintended consequences comes into play. But you create precedent by virtue of this that other people will pay attention to and say, hey, you did it for them, now you've got to do it for me too.
So theoretically, I mean, if we're going to go out there a little bit, that whole neighborhood could just be completely enclosed in 8-foot fences?
Yes.
Every yard?
Yes.
Okay.
And may I also ask, I have an R2 lot. I don't think it's that large, but could I request and insist on having 8-foot fences around 3 sides of my property?
By virtue of the fact that there were no limiting factors as to why a variance was granted in this case, your property as an R2 zone property could ask for a similar exception.
Providing that those hardships are met.
Well,
Providing that those hardships are met. But if you don't define the hardships in this case, anyone can get it.
Correct.
So, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
So, I mean, and, you know, this is me, but if the hardship is that you have to have so much agricultural garden trees in your backyard, fruit and nut trees that you're trying to protect, you know, why, I mean, why would that be a problem to consider? I mean, if, you know, I understand what Patrick's saying, but also, like, if you granted the variance based on that and other people apply, if you have that many people applying, then maybe you need to consider that the fence rule is maybe not what it's cracked up to be.
And-
I mean, at that point.
And I would not argue with your position there, except for that's not what this board
No,
does.
I get you.
That's
But
a,
as
that's
far
a
as,
city council, planning commission
gotcha.
issue. So addressing that at the city council or the planning commission is
But
an
it's-
option every citizen has, but that's not what we do here.
but as far as the hardship goes, if the hardship is, I have gardens, I have fruit and nut trees, that's setting a precedence, so if somebody comes and like wants a variance and meets those requirements, then that's at least something, instead of just coming to you and, oh, I just want an 8-foot fence for 8-foot fence's sake.
Understandable.
The reading that I have here is a hardship cannot be measured in financial or economic terms. It sounds to me like we're trying to do that. Or am I misreading?
For the hardship, you think we're trying to define hardship in terms of an economic loss?
No. The conversation is trying to define that. That's what I think I understood. Maybe I understand incorrectly.
As far as I'm concerned, yes, there is a financial loss to me significantly over the years, but that is not my consideration or why I'm asking for the variance. My hardship is the significant amount of time and effort that I put into it, along with my wife and my kids, to making those gardens, investing in those fruit trees, as far as time and effort, putting a couple years into watering, and then having them destroyed one night. You know, my hardship is protecting my family and my dogs. And I mean, I understand where you guys are coming from to some extent, but this isn't about financial hardship to me. I mean,
That is one of the factors, though.
it is one of the factors.
Okay.
But it is
Anything
not-
else?
No?
Okay. Do I have anybody from the audience that would like to speak? Please come up and state your name and your address. Thank you.
My name is Josh Lyon. I live at 1249 Baldwin Avenue. Regarding the fence next door has brought a tremendous amount of peace to my backyard. I am to the west of their property, and we deal with the exact same deer problems, except for now all the deer don't lay in their backyard and drool over our garden as well. They move on, and my kids are actually, whatever their fence has done to these deer in their direct path through the corridor that they own, whatever that fence has done to that herd is working, because my kids were allowed to play in my backyard this summer, and it felt fantastic. They have been nothing but considerate neighbors to us concerning the 6-foot solid fence. They didn't feel like they wanted to isolate between neighbors. In fact, they were nice enough to even put a gate between our two properties so that we can still interact and intermingle. And I believe that they wholeheartedly made a mistake on the permit process, and I believe they accidentally came up with a solution for Canyon City. It's not ugly. I live next to the thing, and I can live next to the thing for the rest of my life and be perfectly fine with the color and the size of it. And I feel like it shouldn't be dealt with as a guy trying to beg for forgiveness as much as, oh man, I made a mistake. I don't really feel like taking this down. It's really beneficial to me, my family, and my neighborhood. And I kind of feel like the variance for one person could have a natural effect, but what's the matter with protecting our residents with a natural effect of an 8-foot see-through fence is my honest, I know we're not here to change the law, but I feel like they've come up with more of a solution in the middle of this problem. And it has saved, I've seen them grow the biggest, most beautiful garden I have seen them grow yet, and I've lived next to them for 8 years. And they have struggled there since I've moved in there with deer. Like they said, they've fenced in their garden with 6-foot fences. Next thing you know, I look over there and the fence is pushed over and all their gardens demolished. And obviously, that's not good. They have a garden half the size of this room, maybe 3/4 the size of this room on a normal basis, and they share it with their community and this isn't just a Tim and Corey thing. I believe that this, if it's looked at properly and not from a biased standpoint, that this could be a very practical and realistic solution, even if there's a hardship for the safety or the gardening from the deer. Whatever criteria needs to be met to allow people to have a little bit taller fence, I don't think is too much to ask for. I believe that what he's done is a genuine and a achievement at the same time. It's no different than the best recipe Mom ever made. It come from a mistake. The guy made a mistake and he resolved something, I personally feel. That's about all I have to say. And now my kids don't have to walk around with garden tools in my backyard.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? I guess I should have asked if you had a question of him before he left. Did anybody have a question of the?
I'm back.
Okay.
I think I've ascertained the information that I need. Thank you for your clarifying remarks.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience care to? Nobody? All right. Any additional comments, questions? Patrick?
I would point out that twice during the last 7 months, council has been asked to revisit the fence regulations. Council has declined to make any changes to our standards. So the regulations that we have are the regulations that are subject to the variance request before you this afternoon. I would also point out that, again, based upon my analysis, there has been no test for hardship that's made. I understand there's an emotional component associated with this. That's not the subject of a variance request.
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a small statement that hopefully will clarify things. I have great admiration for the intent of the applicant, what he's tried to do for himself, for his family, and for the community. I think it's very commendable. But I have not been able to find, and I was once an elected official, twice elected official, and had to live with the rules that were established for the for the best interest of the majority of the people, that could be changed if there was a better way found. But I have not seen any path for approving this on a ordinance basis. On the emotional basis, oh yes, that's easy. But my obligation is to the city as a total. So I have to say, as wonderful I think as this project is, I don't, unless somebody can show it to me, I cannot agree to the variance because there's no provision for that.
That'll actually be what we vote on.
Yeah.
But I agree with your premise of the whole thought process. Thank you. I'm going to now close this hearing. Is there any further discussion amongst the board members?
Yes.
Sir?
Does safety count as a hardship?
Well, I'm going to say yes, but in what manner are you referring to safety?
Like getting startled in the dark by a 4-point buck in your yard?
Well,
Okay. But by being injured by an animal?
isn't living in
Child.
Colorado assuming an implied risk of having wildlife interactions?
Yeah, I was going to say that would be that would be not living in this state consideration. You could get run over by a doe or a buck walking down the street in this town. So, yes, safety is a factor.
Safety on your property, though.
I'm sorry?
Safety on your property is.
Well, whether you're on your, I'm sorry? Oh, yes, yes. Thank you. And I agree with what you just said. Yes, safety on your property is also an issue. Safety as a whole is an issue. But again, what I just said was you could get accosted by a deer in this city along with any other large city, even in the metroplex of Denver, you can get accosted by a deer. So the safety factor of encountering wildlife is not an overbearing aspect until we get to your particular scenario, and that's what we're deciding today.
But then again, Gary, just to break in there a little bit, the safety is not the issue here. It's the variance of the fence. We're getting back into the emotion and all that. So if it is safety, then that's going to be a DOW issue, or even the police, Canyon City Police to take care of that.
Yeah, and
Safety is not what
Let me
we're
add,
trying.
let me add something to that, Randy. The ordinance on fences was, safety factor was involved in that. So yes, safety is a factor, and yes, you're right about this is a meeting the standard, but in that whole standard, safety was considered. That's the whole reason the city set that fence limit and set those type of fences. Safety was a factor in all of that decision. I didn't mean to cut you off, but.
No, I agree. It still does not meet the hardship rules of the variance.
I agree with you there.
So what would meet the hardship rules of the variance? If it's not people's personal safety in their backyards, it's not a financial aspect, and it's just a topographical. I mean, you guys are playing with words. A hardship means something different to Patrick than it does to me.
That's true, but actually, our conversation is kind of a, for lack of better words, a play on words, because your idea of a hardship and the city's idea of a hardship is where we have a disagreement,
Yeah.
which is why you're here.
Yes, and so I'm saying, as the city should be interested in its citizens' hardships and their safety, and I'm saying that in this particular instance, with where my yard is situated and with the deer populations that come through.
Well, I understand that.
But-
And that's exactly why we're here, and that's what we're about to decide. So the city is interested in it. It's just a question of the outcome of this hearing.
but you're saying that like the safety aspect of it and the fact that my property is being affected doesn't necessarily meet the definitions of a hardship.
I don't think I implied that, but
Well, or the definition of the hardship I wasn't meaning you, but according to the,
but that is the standard we work from.
okay, so I'm asking to me, this isn't necessarily an emotional thing. It's logical to me because I'm asking based on my backyard being somewhere that I would like to feel safe. And, you know, that was the goal I went for to try to accomplish that. I don't understand how, I guess, not having a particular topographical hardship excludes me from the hardship. You see what I'm saying?
Well, and yes, I do hear what you're saying, and during the open part of this, I think everybody understood what point you were bringing up. At this stage, we're at the decision-making
Okay.
process as to whether or not we're going to grant this variance, taking in consideration, as this whole hearing's been about, the position of the city and its occupants and you and your property and your well-being. So based on all that, yeah, we're about to decide whether or not we're going to grant the variance or not. The whole matter of safety is always an underlining factor when the city sets code and considers anything.
Okay.
Thank
And also, when you consider the variance, if the height is not something that you guys are willing to consider, I mean, would the material at least be something you would consider? So I'm not put in a position of having to tear down a whole thing and put my yard at risk for a period of time while I try to figure out something else? Or, you see what I'm saying?
Well, speaking for myself, I don't think you met the burden on the material issue.
Met the
Because
what?
it's not one of the acceptable standards.
Okay.
But that's speaking for me. We're about to decide that.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
And sorry if I rambled
no,
on
no.
or anything. I'm
No.
coming off a 7/12 night shift.
It was a
so
good exchange.
It was just.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, statements?
I did want to say, Mr. Martin, don't run off just for a second. I think I speak for, if not all of us, most of us anyway, that we're very much in sympathy with your plight. I mean, we understand exactly where you're coming from and what you're saying as far as the safety and all that kind of stuff. I think all of us are agreed in that regard, okay? But we're not here for that aspect
I was
of
going
it.
to say, that's a
You
different
know,
conversation.
that's a whole different thing, you know, so we're not there for that, you know. I think Gary mentioned it earlier, you know, the aspects that you're talking about with regard to the safety, and if you don't agree with the way it is, should go to, you know, the city. If the ordinance is not adequate to provide the safety that's needed for the citizens, then you need to go have work on getting the ordinance changed, I think. Am I out of line there? I hope I'm not.
No, you just regurgitated what
Yeah.
I said.
I think that's where we're all going.
Oh, and I
Okay.
understand, you know, I mean, I brought up why I thought it was a hardship and, you know, it's all I can do, so.
Okay. Well, I now call for a motion and a second on the request based upon the findings and the hearing.
I move that we request, so what is the language again?
Here.
The findings of the fact and proposed motion?
Do I have a second on that? You mean to accept the,
Yes.
you're making a motion to accept the findings of facts?
Yeah, I move we accept the findings of the
Okay,
fact.
thank you.
I second that.
We have a second. Denise, will you call roll on?
Board Member Bonagowski.
Aye.
Board Member Dick.
Aye.
Chairman Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
Board Member Willett.
Aye.
Okay, so next, can I have a motion and a second on the findings of the board for today's hearing? Whether the applicant failed or met the standards for the variance.
I would move, Mr. Chairman, that the board failed to find the applicant met acceptable reasons, justification for approving the variance, and therefore denies it. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Denise, would you call roll?
Board Member Dick.
Yeah, aye.
Board Member Willett.
Aye.
Chairman Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bonagowski.
This is a roll call?
Yeah, on the second.
Aye.
You need to lean into the mic just a little.
Aye.
Thank you.
This is on the vote.
Correct.
You're voting yes or no,
This
whether
is-
they
this
have
is
met
all
the
vote.
criteria or not.
Okay, thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. I will say nay.
Board Member Smith.
Aye.
And so at this point, we have a tally of 4 disapprovals and 1 approval, correct? Well, at this point, then, the variance is not granted. Okay, at this point, we'll close for complete.
I think we have some administrative, don't we have to choose you to
Well,
serve again?
that part, we're just
Okay.
closing that part.
Okay,
Yeah, we still got administrative issues to do.
okay.
Okay, on to the next topic. We have elections. You still with us, Randy? Randy?
I'm here.
Okay, well, we thought you went to sleep.
Oh, no, this is exciting. This is the most exciting we've had since anyway.
Okay. Well, I don't know how you're going to vote anonymously, but we have voting for the chairman and the vice chairman. And since you're, unless you want to, you know what, that's a good question. Let me ask Patrick when he gets done here with something.
I don't mind letting people know who I vote for.
Well, I know you don't. But I don't know that we've ever breached this
Oh, okay. I understand.
scenario. I don't want to do nothing wrong, partner. Not that I have never done nothing wrong, but
Yeah, you don't want to get caught publicly, right?
I've been whooped plenty of times. It's okay. We have a unique scenario that I've never breached. We're about to conduct anonymous voting. One of the persons unpresent can't vote anonymously. So,
Can he
can
text,
disguise my
can he
voice.
send a text message to Denise?
well, I was a thought I had, but he'd
Oh, I
have
can
to
do
have
that.
Denise's phone number. And I don't know if she wants to share her.
Randy, do you have my email?
Let me check real quick here.
He doesn't have a problem blurting it out, but I don't want to
Yeah.
break, I don't want to set a new standard. I like you, Randy, but you're not that important on this.
Yeah, yes, I do have your email, yes.
Okay, well then, in that case, would you
Okay.
mind sending her an email for your vote for the chairman position? And I'm gonna hand out slips of paper, and if you would please circle the person you would like to vote for chairman, I would greatly appreciate that. And then fold it in half, and Randy, you can naturally email Denise, and we'll go on.
Working on it.
How much time does this take, buddy? Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
All right, Denise, it's on its way.
I got it.
We're gonna talk about that when we're done with this. I might as well hand these out, because we're gonna be voting on the vice chairman here in a second.
Did the chairman and vice chairman positions get raises again this year?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Is
Did
the
the
what?
chairman and vice president, or vice chairman positions get a raise again this year?
We can discuss that with council if you'd like.
I was gonna say, your raise already has been applied to your check,
Oh, yeah, okay,
unless you're standing on a shorter chair.
yeah.
I have the tally.
Please endure us with that information.
For chair, I have Gary Clark with 3 votes.
Okay. Yay for me.
Yay.
All right, well, I handed out some slips of paper with the exception of our absent except for Randy. And if you would please vote on that and hand those in.
Well, hang on.
I can't, I'm standing.
Denise, I'm gonna send you another one.
Okay.
Okay. This is exciting.
Are you on the edge of your seat? Hey, Randy,
So, yeah, this is like, everybody's got talent or something like that, or whatever it is.
are you on the edge of your seat?
Yes.
Okay, I have a tally.
Thank you. Would you let us know what it is?
Randy Smith.
Randy Smith. There's your raise.
Congratulations,
Yay.
Randy.
Yeah. I want to say personally, I'm glad you're doing it. What are you laughing about? Okay, I do have one issue I would like to bring up right now. And I don't know if maybe we should do a training session on how we conduct it, on how we conduct some of the thought process of this hearing. There's some issues that we discussed tonight that I'm just going to say we went into a little bit more of an indulgence that we really needed to, because this is a mindset that we need to have as a committee as to what we review and why we review it. the emotional aspect of that, I don't know that should ever be a conversation during this committee.
I think Gary, you're right. We did get off track. Instead of focusing on the variance and whether or not they met the criteria, we were looking more into the emotional aspect, and then it got off onto, you know, the children getting attacked and things like that. So we probably do need training, but I'm sure we need to do that with the guidance of Patrick, maybe in a meeting hall, personally, you know, physically there, and in a classroom setting is what I'm saying.
And I agree with you 100% there, and that was the reason I brought it up. I think we need to go over this as a group in a training session, because yes, we did get sidetracked, and I'll blame myself for that a little bit because I didn't want to cut anybody off.
Yeah.
Understanding the safety aspect of this thing, that is something that's always considered in code when the city council approves thing and the planning commission does these kind of things. And especially in this panel, it's a factor that we definitely have to have a mindset for, because we are dealing with the public and their emotional aspects of it to some degree. But at the same time, we have to still adhere to findings based off the facts presented, not emotional concern in it. With that, and I'm stating my opinion, we should limit our emotional view in addressing that with the public.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Turn my microphone on. Mr. Chairman, we do have a training program that we have introduced to the Board of Adjustment previously. It's probably been a while since we've given this training.
It has.
Our city attorney, and by the way, the name that's being displayed there, that's not Catherine Sellers on the screen, by the way. But yes, the city attorney has also participated in these training sessions as well. I can either do this at the next scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting if you'd like to do it here, or if you want to do, we'd still probably have to make sure we meet notice requirements, but for instance, we could conduct it where council does the study sessions at the other end of the room here, wherever you think you'd be more comfortable. I'm more than happy to dust off that presentation and make it again.
Well, and that's where I was headed with this, because it's been a while since we've conducted that training, and we have, what, three new members at this point? Were you at the last?
Yeah, it's been about 4 years, I think.
Okay, well, then you were at the last one then. So we at least have 2 new members. So, yeah, I think it'd be a good refresher if we did that. And yes, that was my point, to bring it up, to do this at a later time, not right now.
No, that's perfectly fine. I'm more than happy. I can put this on the April 4th agenda if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Anybody have an issue with that?
No,
No?
no.
Great.
I thought it was kind of interesting that the introduction of the safety aspect, he provided the attraction inside the fence, you know? You know,
Yeah, and there was so many other options
Yeah.
that the individual, the applicant had, that were never addressed, I guess, on their end. Anyway, any other questions, concerns, thought processes? Anybody handing out food?
not yet,
Okay.
yeah.
He's got an orange for us. Sir, you had something you were going to say, I could tell, other than good night.
Good night.
All right, thanks, everybody.